Being Texan means anything under 90 degrees constitutes fall. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing a reading vlog for the Halloweekend Readathon. Before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments how you are celebrating Halloween. So yes, this is the Halloweekend Readathon. It's starting today and it runs every single Thursday to Sunday evening in all of October. My goal is every single weekend I'm going to try and focus on completing one book from the main prompts. I do have a rough TBR, but honestly it could change, so I'm not going to give you a set TBR at the start of this. Rather, we're just going to see how it goes every single weekend. I downloaded the audiobook for The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson this morning and couldn't resist myself. I went ahead and started it. Whoops. This is going to be completing the prompt of a Halloween word in the title, blood, obviously. So when I went into this, all I knew was that it was a Carrie retelling and that it had some discussions of racism. I'm currently 3 hours in and I'm having a great time, but also incredibly furious a lot of the time. Our main character, Maddie, is half black. However, she has been living as a white girl for most of her life. Her father is very racist, has some pretty backwards ideals, and basically wishes it was still in the 1960s. On top of that, unfortunately, seeing as how it's a Carrie retelling, Maddie is subject to a lot of very vicious, really racist bullying. We also see from the perspective of some of her other classmates and a podcast which is being written 10 years in the future about this incident. Guys, I'm really enjoying this. It's so good. Highly recommend the audiobook. It is a full cast and fantastic. I feel so terrible for Maddie every time we see from her perspective. I just want to wrap her up in a hug. What is truly horrifying is that I believe Jackson probably got inspiration from the fact that there was a school in Georgia which only had their first integrated prom in 2014, which is when this book is set, also in Georgia, and the school still has segregated proms. Through some of the other characters, we do see that some people are trying to push for a integrated prom, and unsurprisingly, they are getting some pushback, trying to lean on the excuse of tradition, because, you know, that's what prom's about, racism. Like I said, it is so anger-inducing. I am so intrigued to see how we get to the events that are being discussed in the podcast, which I don't want to say just because like of spoilers. So that's it for now. As far as this video is going to go, I am basically planning to update every single weekend whenever I read one of these books. Can say that I will definitely have some B-roll of all of the haunted houses Josh and I go to, because that's our thing. Every October we go to a different haunted house every single weekend. As I mentioned in the intro, it actually was only like 78 degrees today, which constitutes fall in my brain. So I went with wearing a sweater. I was really channeling the fall energy, finally.
Went from a sweater yesterday to a tank top today. Yeah, the irony is not lost on me. Hey guys, so it's Friday. I have continued reading The Weight of Blood. I'm currently like probably about 60% in. I'm freaking loving this. I am just so impressed at the number of different ways Jackson has been able to incorporate different variations of racism. And I love the alternate perspective where we are also seeing the case of this entire situation being investigated by a podcaster. Also very fun. I just appreciate the different angles they keep trying to come at it. There's also different pieces of media that sometimes either report on the case where Maddie is supposed to have done this thing, or reporting on all of the terrible instances that led up to the prom night. Along with Maddie, we also see from the perspective of Jules, who is kind of the head tormentor. We also see from Wendy, who is best friends with Jules. I definitely could equate her with Alex from Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid, where she thinks she's being like progressive, but it's all very performative. And then Wendy's boyfriend Kenny, I can really appreciate his perspective in this story, and he also has a little sister who is like a very vocal activist, and I really like the discussions that happen between Kenny and his sister. While she is such an activist and trying to make things better for this small town, at the same time I like that Kenny calls her out on sort of gatekeeping blackness. Plus it brought up some discussions around colorism colorism, seeing as how Maddie is lighter skinned. Also, I know that I mentioned in my first update that this does have a full cast of characters in the audiobook. It also has different sound effects, and I really like how it has this like swooshing effect whenever we change perspectives, and it almost feels like you're like watching a recreation documentary and the camera's like doing a dramatic pan away to like cut the scene. I don't know why I like the transition of that noise, but it's really entertaining. Overall, the audiobook performance is just top tier. Hey guys, so it's actually Monday, but technically first weekend of Halloweekend ended yesterday, and I did manage to finish The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. Hot damn, she does it again. This was freaking fantastic. Had such a great time reading this. It was such a thought-provoking book, and I think that's one of the things with Jackson's works that's really impeccable is the way she manages to make it a very thrilling story to follow while also doing some fantastic nuanced discussions of societal issues. As I mentioned previously, I did really enjoy that whole podcast element within the story. I thought it was really interesting because the podcast element allowed us to see some outside perspectives that we wouldn't have seen if we only followed the same 4 characters the entire way through. On top of that, we were able to see the legacy that this prom night had on the town and the way the story and the narrative is now being told in the future. My only downside with the podcast part is I do think that seeing as how we are told the final events pretty early on in the book through the podcast, that made it so the final reveals at the end weren't nearly as jaw-dropping as I was anticipating. I really was thinking that somehow Jackson was going to pull out this giant twist. That didn't really happen. This did kind of still have a final reveal shocking moment, but was a little underwhelming in comparison to the rest of the climax. And then in terms of characters, on all of them I had mixed feelings, and I do think that did make them feel a bit more real. Every single one of them definitely read like a teenager in 2014, though I definitely could have done without the little insta-love plotline that sort of pops up midway through. However, I can tell that since this had multiple main characters as well as the podcast element, Jackson didn't really have as much time to really dive in and explore all of the depths with each of the characters in comparison to her other books I've read where there's only one main character. In particular, I would have really liked to see more from Maddie's perspective, seeing as how she is kind of the titular character to the entire story. But I did like that we were still able to see the self-discovery journey she was going on through other people's eyes. The climax had me so sucked in. That area was really where this book earned the title of a horror book. Even though the final reveal did not have me completely flabbergasted, I still have to say I think this is my second favorite of Jackson's work. So in the end, this came out to about 4.5 stars on Compile, and definitely leaving it there. It deserves that rating. So freaking good. That is it for now. I will talk to you guys again this Thursday for our next book. Hey guys, bet you can guess what today is. Yep, it's Thursday, starting the next round of Halloweekend Readathon. I'm going to be picking up The Chalkman by CJ Tudor, which is going to be completing favorite subgenre, psychological thriller. I think that's what this is, at least. A lot of people had it marked as that on Goodreads. So I believe this is following a group of kids when they were younger, had this like Chalkman drawing thing that they would use as like a secret code, but eventually they find a Chalkman drawing next to like a dead body. Now we're revisiting that same group of friends as adults. I think one of them is killed and has the Chalkman symbol drawn near their body, and that's what brings them all back together, I think. I've heard very mixed things about this. I know some people have given it 5 stars. I know some people have given it 2 stars. I don't know where I'm going to fall. For the time being, I'm going to start into this. I am currently helping to do some sprints with Michelle on her channel. Obviously, we're in the middle of a sprint, so I need to officially start into this book now. Yes, this lighting is terrible. Yes, we're just gonna deal with it. Hey y'all, so it's Friday. I've read a lot
of the Chalkman. I'm at about 283. I'm at 283. I don't know how to feel about this book. On one hand, fantastic atmosphere. Truly, no matter what time of year it is, this author perfectly encapsulates it with their writing. So we start out and our main characters are on summer holiday. Well, excuse me, in the past timeline, they are on summer holiday and definitely just feels like you are a 12-year-old again. It's super hot outside. All you want is a ice pop. But then it transitions to this nice crisp fall, which is obviously very reminiscent to what I would love for it to be outside right now. And then eventually it transitions into like chilly, dark winter time. Also in the current timeline, there's just this like tense, unsettling feeling that just permeates the entire story. I think that's very much lent into the intrigue I have with the story because I'm definitely suspicious and there's lots of tension built. It's really slow moving. The alternating timelines work well in terms of keeping up that suspense and that tension, but at the same time, they're also a little frustrating because it feels like they always happen right when we're about to finally get an answer, and it's just like, oh, come on. In both timelines too, so it's consistently frustrating. I will say they're not always well separated. Sometimes in the past timeline, there will be comments made that are alluding to stuff in the future, but it's like if we're set in the past timeline, then technically speaking, this Ed wouldn't know that. So why did you include that line? Seeing as how I'm this far in now, there have been a few reveals now, and with them, I like where this is going because every time they are surprising, but I feel like every single one of them is just slightly overwritten because I put two and two together a lot faster than our main character Ed does, and then it's just me sitting there being like, are you gonna figure it out now? How about now? Some of the others have actually happened and it feels like they don't really elicit any kind of a reaction from our main character, even though they're supposed to be these, you know, shocking moments, and yet it feels like he doesn't really have any true shock reaction to it. It's weird. I'm finally starting to put together what's happening in this a little bit more, and I am pretty invested. Like I said, I've been working through it pretty quickly. The main character is not very likable. At the same time, I do pity him because he's clearly gone through some really awful things in his life. What really just grinds my gears is anytime there's a female character, he's just like so creepy or almost misogynistic in reaction to them. On top of that, there's also a sexual assault which happens on page. Definitely caught me off guard. On one hand, I do think it is a plot device, but the way it is utilized makes sense. So it really threw me off at first and I did not like it, obviously, but I do think since I kept reading, it did make more sense for why the author did that. Just want to put that out there. In the past timeline, we do also see a good deal of Ed's little friends. They have a few specific characteristics that help you remember who's who, but honestly, across the board, they kind of feel like a knockoff Losers Club from It. Particularly the female main character, Nikki. She definitely feels like a Beverly 2.0. So all in all, I'm liking this in terms of the plot. Surprised at how horrific certain elements are in this because I went into this thinking it was a thriller, but I have seen that some people actually categorize it as a horror, so I'm not sure which one it goes into, but I could definitely see it writing the line between those two genres. Josh and I are definitely going to be going to something tomorrow. I don't know if we're gonna do a haunted house or if we might do this like fall amusement park thing, which does have a haunted corn maze. Since I am dead, I can take off my head. Hey y'all, so it's Monday. I officially finished out the Chalkman and I still don't really know how I feel about this. I do think the best thing about this book is the atmosphere. I will say in regards to the writing, the author would occasionally drop in these like very deep, relatable sort of lines. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't actually tab any of them, but I probably should have because some of these were really, really strong lines that I just was not anticipating in a thriller that I still can't really decide if I liked or not. All in all, I was pretty invested in the mystery throughout this entire book, but once I hit the end, I kind of called it not quite, like there was certain elements I didn't quite get. However, I still don't know if I really like that ending. It just seems sort of unrealistic, but even if you ignore the unrealistic, I just don't know if it was really satisfying. As terrible as this crime was, honestly, the creepiest part to me was this final thing we figure out in the epilogue. That was more unsettling than anything else in this book. I still maintain that this group is a knockoff losers club. Nikki did continue to show more similarities to Beverly. Once that connection had been drawn in my brain, I just couldn't ignore it. I was just finding more and more things to link the two different groups of characters. I don't know how I felt about this book. I did my call pile breakdown and it came out to about 3.5 stars. Honestly, I'm just thinking that maybe CJ Tudor's writing style for thrillers isn't really my sort of cup of tea. Okay, so weekend 2 done.
Hey y'all, happy weekend 3. Already not off to the best start. So not only did I break my 3rd Fitbit wristband today, which is really sad. Thankfully, I had like a pack of 6, so I have a few more in the chamber that I can just kind of toss on whenever one breaks. But apart from that, in terms of the readathon, I was planning to tackle the prompt of host's favorite this weekend. Originally, I was going to be reading Confessions by Kanae Minato, which is a fairly short book, and I was going to be reading it via audio only. Because of that, I thought, you know, I can kind of put it off until Friday, don't need to start it on Thursday, I'll have plenty of time. Well, I went to download the audiobook this morning. Turns out the audiobook my library has for this is in Spanish and was not well advertised, so I only figured that out once I had downloaded it. Luckily for me, I did recently pick up Cackle by Rachel Harrison, and this was also one of Erin's favorite books, so that worked out really well. I originally sold this as like a sapphic witchy romance. I don't know where I got that. Michelle corrected me that no, this is not sapphic. In fact, I've seen a lot of reviews for it recently, and it sounds like it's more along the lines of this woman kind of finding herself after she moves to a small town, and she makes friends with this like older witchy woman, and maybe finds that she has powers herself, or like finds power in herself. I know this was a finalist in the horror category for the 2021 Goodreads Choice Awards, but I have heard it's not really considered horror, so I don't really know what kind of genre to expect going into this book. The one downside is, unfortunately, I can't get an audiobook of this one, so I am going to have to read it completely physically. Thankfully, it's only about 291 pages, I think is what it was. That's not terrible, but it really would have been great if I knew this yesterday and started it Thursday night. That would have been useful. So my plan for the rest of the night is to get cozy and jump on some reading sprints so I can start into this. Whilst doing that, my mom bought me some vampire blood candles today, and I love these. They smell so good. Also, I just want to say the caps for these are so underappreciated. They're so cool. So I'm gonna light these babies up and, you know, just get in the mood. Hey guys, so it's Sunday night, and this has definitely been the worst weekend thus far. I have not read that much of this. Actually, my my bookmark just fell out. I think I am currently at like page 36, 37, something like that. In terms of reading physically, didn't do great this weekend. I did read a little bit whenever Josh and I were at different houses when we were waiting in line occasionally, but obviously that was like very hit or miss. It really depended on how the lighting was and whether or not I could actually see my book. Though I will say I had very funny reactions to me reading this. There was one actor who was walking around that was just, he didn't speak, but he kind of like pointed at the book with a questioning face, and then I was like, what? You gotta pass the time somehow. And he was just like, Then we were waiting in line for a different one, and actually the person in front of us was like, are you working on homework? No, I'm just getting some reading done. In that same line, actually, the woman who was letting people into the haunted house, she actually paused me and was like, hey, what are you reading? What's it about? And I told her, and she was like, wow, that actually sounds really good. So, hey, might have gotten somebody to pick this book up. Did not do great in terms of reading this one. Josh and I watched A Little Evil today, though, so I did at least get a horror movie watched on top of
you know, going to the haunted houses. Seeing as how this weekend we went to a collection of haunted houses on this one property, they also had little shops, and I got a little sticker that says open up new worlds, read a book. I have done awful in reading this. My plan is I'm gonna go take a shower, and then I'm just gonna huddle down in bed and try to get as much of this read tonight as I possibly can. This is definitely the worst weekend in terms of reading. Really though, I am so frustrated that I didn't double check that audiobook on Thursday. Damn it, Past Nat, why did you do that? Hey y'all, happy Halloweekend 4. Guess who finally finished Cackle yesterday? It's Thursday night, so I finished it Wednesday for last weekend. It's fine. I mean, I know nobody really cares, but like, ugh, unfortunate. I ended up loving this book. The vibes are freaking immaculate. This is definitely a very character-driven story. We spend majority of it solely focused on Annie trying to stand up for herself, slowly coming to love who she is as a person, taking the energy she's been putting into the men in her life and instead focusing it on herself and just finding happiness in being who she is. I really enjoyed that message of the story. The world jumps off the page. It really just perfectly sets you into the scenery. It's gorgeous. I loved it. I honestly could see myself rereading this every October because it is so perfect for that. Annie is a very fully fleshed out character. She's not particularly likable, I will say. She's pretty morally gray. There were definitely moments where I just wanted to shake her and scream at her, but at the same time, like, she is going through things so she can finally find the person she needs to be so that she can be happy in her life. And I really loved her relationship with Sophie. Sophie has the dream life, y'all. Sophie is both a good and bad influence on Annie and equally wonderful ways. Her character was also very well explored, slowly peeling back layer by layer as we get to know her and as the women's relationship improves throughout the book. But even with everything she's lived through in her life, she still occasionally does have to learn new things, and I really liked the relationship. It was so sweet. I described the Starless Sea as a book that brought all the best things in life together. This is like that, but in fall. It just seduces you with the perfection of a crisp, cool day, warm cup of coffee, delicious pie, cozy sweaters, good glass of wine. It really was so perfect. I do think it's really weird that this book is marketed as horror. It's not a horror book. If anything, I would say it's like magical realism with a little bit of a spooky mystery. There are scenes that definitely have some suspense, that build some tension, but they're not scary. There's nothing really gory or horrific about this book. So I finally finished this. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I'm glad I picked it up, even if I wasn't originally planning to, but it worked out very well for me. Now, for this weekend, I was originally planning to read a different book. Thankfully, I did go on and double check that I can get the audiobook of it and downloaded it. However, I just started a different audiobook yesterday. I want to try and finish that, and because of it, I don't think I'm gonna have the time to dedicate to the book I was initially planning to read, which means we're gonna go with my easy book of the month, and that is Nomen Omen Volume 1 by Marco Bucci. This is a graphic novel. It is quite short. I picked this up for Halloween vibes as the prompt. This works out perfectly because I can get this read in one sitting and I still can focus on the books that I'm currently reading. So I believe this is following a young woman who is in some sort of a car accident and she's still living but doesn't have a heart anymore. Creepy. Weird. But I'm intrigued, and I mean, come on, look at the cover. That definitely gives you Halloween vibes. It's creepy, it's cool, it's beautiful. I'm very excited to see more of this art style. It's gorgeous. I like the back and forth use of coloring. I'm already digging these little pieces on the side. Like, let's go. I'm excited. I am not gonna read this tonight, however, so sorry. This was just my intro for the weekend. Fun story in terms of haunted houses. Josh actually won free tickets to the haunted house we went to last weekend. So we're gonna be going back there again. I will have more B-roll, hopefully of different things this time around. We shall see. But same haunted house twice. Not uncommon for us to do that at ones we really enjoy. Not just for friends. Lately I've been dressing for revenge. Hey guys, so yeah, I have been sort of obsessed with Taylor Swift's Midnights lately. I know I'm not alone, but I'm just putting it out there in this vlog because this is what I'm filming. Anyway, I finally finished out Nomen Omen Volume 1, Total Eclipse of the Heart, and I will say this took an unexpected turn into my favorite sort of story, which is creepy folklore. Did not know I was getting that, but I am so happy. Honestly, I really didn't need much to be interested in this series, and now I do know it is a limited series, only has 3 volumes, which lucky for me, my library has the next 2 on Hoopla. I went into this with very few expectations, and it did not take long for me to be wowed. What really made me start to enjoy it was when I realized one of the characters we are introduced to is actually a person from Celtic folklore. What's doubly intriguing with this, though, is that it's a urban fantasy. So urban fantasy and creepy folklore are not 2 things I've ever seen together, at least I don't think, but I am very into it. There is solid diversity in terms of the cast, and we have a wide variety of characters, which I am super interested to learn more about. The art is absolutely gorgeous, as you saw in a little bit of my B-roll. I really appreciate the utilization of color, given that our main character, whose eyes we're seeing through, actually has achromatopsia. I think that's how it's pronounced. Basically, she can't see color. As we get further into the story and we slowly start to lean more and more into the fantastical elements, the art style really starts to match that creepy folklore aesthetic that's going on. There's also been numerous pop culture references, which I know some people aren't a big fan of. Personally, I've really enjoyed them. Prologue chapter is set in 1995, and it is a little weird that we're following 2 college students and they have a cell phone. Not the most logical thing there. I could look past it. All in all, though, I really enjoyed this, and like I said, I am very excited to continue into the rest of the series later this month. Actually, what am I saying? Probably next month. Hey y'all, so it's the last day of this readathon, and I have been working on my book. I just have not taken the time to film any updates. Friday was my birthday, and then yesterday we went to celebrate it, went out to dinner, and then Josh and I went to our favorite haunted house, which was a ton of fun. Yeah, obviously I was a little bit busy, so even though I have been reading, haven't actually filmed anything. And even now that I am filming, I haven't quite finished this book yet. I probably will finish tonight. I just don't have faith in myself that I can finish it, film this update, and get it edited all before I go to bed. I read None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney for the final prompt, which was a genre blend. This is set in 1982, so it's kind of historical thriller. See what I did there? I'm definitely really enjoying this. Pitched to me as YA Silence of the Lambs, and I am definitely really into it. I appreciate the fact that it has the sort of, behavioral unit perspective, like Criminal Minds, or almost a Mindhunter sort of situation, because initially these 2 teenagers are recruited by the FBI to interview teen offenders. So we have our 2 main characters, Emma and Travis. Emma is actually the victim of a previous serial killer and is trying to move past that, but she also is definitely wanting to try and help people who are in similar situations as herself, or catch these guys who did something similar to her. On the opposite side, Travis's father was a marshal, and since his father has recently passed away, he is starting to toss his hat into the ring, get involved with law enforcement. Eventually, Emma has to go in to interview a killer who does fit within the scheme of serial offenders that they've been interviewing. However, it is to gain information on a current case that the FBI is investigating. I have been really enjoying this. I do like that we've been slowly getting new pieces of information to sort of put together and figure out who is going to be the murderer in a way that fits with this sort of a setup. So we understand the psychology, the background of the individual, we start to figure out what their modus operandi is, what it means to them. And then now I am actually in the final climax, and I'm definitely really engaged. I have been reading this for probably the last 2 hours. I like both our main characters, but I do feel like perspective shifts do tend to favor Emma. We also see from a few different perspectives of the FBI agent who is in charge of this section, which has been started. We see from his boss's perspective, and then occasionally we actually have a chapter or 2 from the killer's perspective, which is very awesome. So this definitely is a sort of cop procedural sort of thriller, and I am really into it. As far as the historical element goes, I don't know if that's like the strongest aspect in the story. It's just not fully putting me into 1980s atmosphere. I do think occasionally Marney will mention things that does remind me, yes, this is not current day, but it's not something I'm conscious of constantly while reading. I'm also not really sure. I think there's the possibility that a romantic subplot might eventually develop between our two main characters, but I don't know, that could also just be me reaching. It's like there's certain moments where you can definitely tell they're starting to become friends and not just work colleagues, but occasionally it feels a little bit more romantic. I'm not sure. I did recently find out that apparently this is going to have a sequel, so maybe there could be some more building of that in the next book. I don't know, this is just speculation. I also have the audiobook of this, which I've been listening to. I think it is a well done production. There are multiple voice actors. Usually we have the male voice actor when it is one of the adults, and also I think there's a specific male voice actor for the killer. Anytime we're seeing something that should be considered in the killer's voice, that voice actor is reading it, even if it's in the chapter that the other voice actor had been reading for. And I appreciate the consistency that has as far as storytelling. So yes, I haven't quite finished this yet, but currently I'm honestly estimating like a solid 4-star. I don't love this as much as other YA mysteries or thrillers I've read previously, but I do really appreciate the setup, and I'm really loving the way the mystery has been done. It's very original as far as YA mysteries go, but I would like to have a little bit more connection with either the characters or the atmosphere. Whenever it comes to historical books, I always want a strong atmosphere, and this doesn't quite have that. I'll put my ending rating up on the screen. Hopefully it is at least 4 stars. Okay, and with that, it is the end of this vlog. Thank you so much to all of the hosts for putting on this readathon. I had a ton of fun. I also am so glad that I was able to participate, because this really helped me work through a few books in a short amount of time, obviously excluding Cackle. That one not so much. Anyway, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials linked in the description if you're interested in keeping up with what I am reading. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!